last class on Psalms, and I don't know, next spring I'm going to try to do something else, but we've been talking about Psalms as basically settings of Psalm texts. What I want to deal with today is a couple of fairly famous pieces that use Psalm text. One of them paraphrased. It's a paraphrased version of the Psalm. The other is the Brahms Requiem, which uses Psalm text in 3 of its movements. But to see, sort of how some composers have dealt with the Psalms and dealt with the ideas that come across in them. But let's start off with a word of prayer. Creator God, we'd like to thank you for this day, for the coming season, for your Son and the faith that we have through him, for the opportunity we have to gather at this church and learn about you and worship. Be with us as we do so. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Yes, I chose 2 Bs, Bach and Brahms. We did Bernstein's. We've done 3 Bs, just not the usual 3 Bs. Anyway, the Ein fester Burg ist unser Gott, is a mighty fortress is our God. I mean, it's one of the most famous hymns, of course, in the Protestant traditions. And Martin Luther wrote the text, probably adapted the music from a previous source, and so he is credited with writing this chorale, and that makes it terribly important in the Lutheran tradition because the founder of the Lutheran tradition wrote it. And Bach wrote a cantata, or a piece of music for soloists, choir, and orchestra that would be performed on Reformation Sunday. Reformation Sunday, as most of us know, takes place in usually late October. And so Bach takes this chorale and uses it in 4 of the movements in this cantata. And what we're going to do is look at the first movement. And it's the text as we see it starts with Martin Luther. And so here's the text of that Luther wrote. And of course we sing a translation of this when we sing "The Mighty Fortress is Our God." This is based on Psalm 46, and it's based really closely on Psalm 46 with a Christian twist. It's always important to remember, of course, that the Psalms themselves were written for Hebrew worship, and we often adapt them into something that includes things that we talk about in the Christian tradition, but would not necessarily have been talked about in the Jewish tradition. This one in manuscript starts off saying, for the choir director, a psalm of the sons of Korah, who had been members of the tribes of Levi, who of course were the worshiping officials in the ancient Hebrew world, set to Alamoth. Alamoth would be a melody that they would have sung this to. What it sounded like is completely lost to the sands of time, but it would probably be a melody. And the text goes, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, and though the mountains slip into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains quake at its swelling pride. So whatever happens on earth, we stick with the notion that God is our refuge and strength. Then the text says, Selah, which was some kind of response that was often made after sections of Psalms. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy dwelling places of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She will not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations made it on uproar. The kingdoms tottered. He raised his voice. The earth melted. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. Selah. So again, no matter what happens, we're back to the God of Jacob being our stronghold. Then come, behold the works of the Lord, who has wrought desolations in the earth. He makes wars to cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariots with fire, obviously referring to what happened in the Red Sea. Cease striving and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us, and we're back to the God of Jacob, who's our stronghold, Selah. So it is a psalm of the power of God and the power that God brings into our lives. So Luther takes this and writes a chorale. Now the chorale goes on for several verses. In fact, in the Lutheran tradition, the chorales sometimes go on for 20 verses. And if you actually read what went on in Leipzig, this piece was written in 1715 in Weimar, and then it was performed in Leipzig a few times when Bach was there, the 27 years he was there. We know that the services were 4 hours long by law. Remember, the town council ruled not only the temporal aspects of the city, but also the religious life. And a lot of this was just part of, you lived in a Lutheran city, you went to a Lutheran church. And that Lutheran church, the services were 4 hours, at least the high service of God, the helped Gottesdienst was 4 hours long. The sermon was 1 hour long by law. And the cantata was performed either before the sermon or around the sermon, if it was particularly long. But these were works that were done, complicated choral works, were done every week. And Bach was using a chorale again. It's described for that day. So this cantata could only be performed on Reformation Sunday. It wouldn't have been done any other Sunday. And of course, we know the chorale. A mighty fortress is our God, a good defense and weapon. He helps us freely out of distress that we have now met with. Could be put a little better in terms of the English, but it's obviously, the ideas are taken straight from the psalm. But then we go off and say the old evil enemy. Well, what's the old evil enemy? Das alte böse Feind is, der alte böse Feind, is Satan. Well, Satan's not talked about in the Psalms. Satan's not a concept you read about in the Old Testament. Satan is well, you do at times, but it's certainly not going on in the Psalm. But the old evil enemy earnestly plots against us. Great might and many forms of deceit are his fearsome weapons. On earth there is none to match him. So you have the first verse with, kind of a diminished seventh chord or something. Not musically, but still, you end with fear at the end of this movement. But of course, in the second verse, you go on and start talking then about the power of God. So anyway, it's a long, it doesn't use all the psalm, of course, but it certainly uses the ideas of the psalm, and the ideas of the psalm come back in later verses as well. So Bach takes this chorale, the text, and the music, and the idea of this piece is the strength of God, the power, and you can certainly hear it in his musical setting of it. The text, if you count there's 9 lines there, and so there's 9 lines of the chorale. Ba 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 da da dee dee da dum to ba 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 dee ba bum bum. Those then repeat, and then there's 5 more after that. So Bach takes every one of these lines and sets it. Well, first of all, when you start off this thing, this music is charging forward from the first. The cantata basically becomes about the power of fighting, of Christians fighting Satan. And so the opening, this is a performance from the Netherlands Bach Society, who's in the process of putting every work by Bach on the internet. That's a large project. Anyway, this thing starts off, it sounds like you've got your horse and you're just riding forward. Well, and I forgot to plug in the speakers. Just give me a moment here, and we will have sound. We're jumping on our compositional horse immediately. And Bach doesn't just, it's not set, ba, 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 da, da, dee, dee, dum, dum. He's filling in the notes so that you've got more motion. Da, ba, 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 beep, ba, bum, bum, bum. Anyway, that gets sung by one set of voices. And then the next set of voices. And then the next set of voices, with the others continuing, and then finally the fourth set of voices. After they've all sung it, then the oboes play it without the decoration, and then it's played by the bass line. So you actually hear the melody of this line 6 times. You know, it's a little hard to miss what's going on in this piece. So again, we start. And here's the first line in the basses. Make sure I've got maximum volume. Tenors. Sorry. No. It's the voices. Next step. Become the oboes. Okay, so that's the first line. We now do that with the second line. But we keep some of the first line going at the same time. This is not like those nice, neat hymns we sing in church where everybody's singing the same note at the same time. This is called counterpoint. And counterpoint, if you want to give it a nice colloquial definition, it's what line is the most important? I don't know. Obviously, what's most important is that melody, but we're about to hear one of the voices start with ba 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 ba. So they go to the second line, but the first line just continues on. The oboes. Okay, now we repeat back to the beginning. This is actually the chorale, the hymn tune, is in what the Germans call bar form, which means you have a little A section, and then a little A section, and then a B section. And if you actually go through our hymnal and find a lot of the German chorales, you'll see that the first line repeats, and then the second and the third and fourth lines are different. I mean, in terms of the music. This is a longer tune than that. But we're musically, we're going right back to the beginning, but we're picking up the third verse of the chorale now, as we still, you know, are bathing in the power of God that we read about in Psalm 46. Male alto in this one. Hey, here come the oboes again. Actually enter on the melody just to measure after the oboes. You kind of hear their first note and then it sort of disappears into the texture, but they are playing the melody. Okay, comes the second line. There it is. The alto is fine, old melody. Oboes, and then melody. Next line. most completely characterized. Next line. Now, the last line of the tune is the same thing as the second and fourth lines. Just goes right down the scale. Ba dee da dum ba ba beep ba ba bum. So this will sound a lot like something we've already heard. And it doesn't have the first line going on at the same time. Bach actually kind of rewrites that ninth line, and then the scale finally goes down to conclude. Just to show you how much this piece is about fighting the devil, the fifth movement sounds like this, just briefly. All of this activity in the orchestra, these are little devils running around in the world. Listen to when the choir comes in, they're singing all together another verse of Ein feste verse. So the orchestra's having fun playing this absolutely evil jig, and the choir is standing there strongly, singing about the power of God against these devils. Anyway. Yeah, it is all in German, but I mean, the word painting and everything that's going on in these things, the music really brings alive what's going on in the text. That's one of the things you're going to find in Bach all the time. If you go Bach to it and check it out more than once. Any questions about that? Yeah.
I think of the hours it would have taken to write out a score and a set of parts. How in the world did he have the time to do that?
This is one of the great mysteries of, I mean, Bach's job in Leipzig was insane. He was in charge of the education of the choir boys, musical and non-musical. He actually hired somebody out of his own pocket to teach Latin because he didn't have time to do that. You were supposed to write one of these pieces a week and have it performed. I mean, write the piece, get the rehearsals done, and it'd be performed on Sunday. And there were actually people who did it. Bach did not. He didn't get along with the Leipzig Town Council very well. It's a long story. It was only the first 3 years or so that he really kind of took that part of the job seriously. And then he started reusing his cantatas. We know what cantata was used many of the Sundays. We know, for example, when this thing was performed. So, I mean, I don't quite know how you were supposed to do the job. But it was the patronage system, and no one cared. If you couldn't do it, they'd find somebody who would. But Bach and the Leipzig Town Council were on the outs by 1730, and he continued working there until 1750. And this musician that every musician today bows down to at the foot of a 900-foot statue, Bach, you know. Actually, when he died, a lot of people considered him old-fashioned, and the Leipzig Town Council was more than glad to be done with him. But how he did all of that, there was help. You know, if you look through the manuscripts, there's a lot of hands in them. His wife, all those kids he had, other musicians were helping to copy things out. It just had to be a frenetic life. But if he'd actually done what he was supposed to, he should have written in Leipzig about 1,350 cantatas, and he only actually wrote about 250 while he was there. So he was lazy. Plus a whole pile of other music. Anyway, okay. One of the people who get to know this work often hold it in extremely high regard. It is a gorgeous statement of the comfort that we seek in the Lord upon the death of someone that we know, member of our family. The power that God brings to our lives in trying to get over such hurt. And I mean, kind of amazingly, it was written by a man who, religion does not seem to have been terribly important to Brahms. He was not a particularly religious man. But it's called Ein Deutsches Requiem, a German requiem. You have to remember, of course, that it's the 19th century. The Protestant movement's been around for a long time, and Germany is kind of separated between Roman Catholic areas and Protestant areas. I mean, this was the Treaty of Württemberg that broke up it ended the 30 Years' War. And the way it ended it was by saying, you know what, we're never going to stop fighting until we just figure out a way to say, this is what we are. So they say, whatever the prince of an area is, everyone is that. And they gave everyone 6 months to find a place they could live and pursue the religion that they wanted to. And then they just froze the borders. So Germany, Leipzig, for example, where Bach was run by Protestants. So it became a Protestant area of Germany. Dresden, on the other hand, was run by Catholics, so it became a Catholic area of Germany. So of course, you have strong Roman Catholic presence in German-speaking areas, and a strong Lutheran presence. Brahms was born Lutheran. Again, it wasn't terribly important to him, but an awful lot of times you would hear a requiem in Germany. It was a Roman Catholic requiem, which is a set of Latin texts that had been sung for centuries at the services for the dead. Brahms, early on, a friend and mentor of him was the composer Robert Schumann. He died in 1856 in an insane asylum at a fairly young age. And his mother died in 1865. And Brahms seemed to be looking for a way to come to grips with these deaths. So he actually started in the late 1850s, and then in the 1860s, he wrote more movements to this. And he calls it a German requiem because it comes out of the Deutsches Bibel, the translation of the Bible that Luther did for Lutherans into German. And Brahms selected the texts that he wanted in this piece, that he was clearly writing for himself and writing for others. The piece is about 1 hour and 10 minutes long. And obviously there's a lot of text in it. But they were all selected by the composer, who was just trying to, let's see, my cursor has, I can find it again if I do that. There we go. Anyway, the text, and I know this is kind of small, but I'll tell you what's going on in it. Make it a little, no, I'm hitting the wrong one. Let's see how big I can make it. Whee! That's about where we're gonna get. Anyway, so there's 7 movements. And in the first movement, Psalm 126 appears. Again, these are all, again, he calls it a German requiem because he's distinguishing it from the Roman Catholic Latin requiem. And he starts off with, one of the Beatitudes. Any Christian's going to identify. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. No, don't translate the page for me. It's already translated. And then he goes on to Psalm 126. They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. He that goeth forth and weep, bearing precious seed, shall doubtlessly come again rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. A reminder that the sorrow you're experiencing right now will not dominate your life. You will have joyful moments down the road. You have to survive now, but doubtless it come again with rejoicing. So you have that in the first movement. There's 3 other movements where he makes use of psalm texts. In the third movement, we're going to break these up. In the third movement, we're in Psalm 39, verses 4 through 7. And this is about the frailty of humans. Lord, make me know my end and the measure of my days. What it is. that I may know how frail I am. Behold, you have made my days the breadth of a hand, and my age is as nothing before thee. You know, yes, you last forever. I don't. And the way Brahms sets this is so wonderful because he has a single baritone singing these texts, personalizing it for any one person to say, and then the choir picks it all up, generalizing for the community. I mean, it's a really nice gesture. But then we conclude with, my hope is in thee. Of course, the music changes completely when he gets to my hope is in thee. And then really the most famous movement of this, we've sung this, I mean, it's been years, but we've sung this as an anthem in church. It's Psalm 84, verses 1, 2, and 4. Translated here is, how amiable are thy tabernacles. We would more translate it, how lovely is thy dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. My soul longs, yea, even faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cries out for the living God. Blessed are they that dwell in thy house. You are still praising thee. And what I wanted to do for the rest of this time is talk about and listen how Brahms sets these texts, how they really come alive in this piece where he's, dealing with how difficult death is. The place the whole piece, I mean, you finally get the big message, is not a psalm text. It's actually in the 6th movement. It's out of Corinthians chapter 15. And, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death will be swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? And the choir is just shouting out, Tod, Tod, in death. Wo ist, what is the line? Wo ist dein Sieg? Where is your sting? And the question is just getting asked in this joyful music. Because, of course, there's because of the hope and the resurrection. So, anyway, those are the texts. And I have a video of the piece where the texts are actually, they're super titles or subtitles. So we can see what is being sung at any given moment. Because my German isn't good enough to understand what's going on. I know that much. But this is a recording of the Berlin Philharmonic and Claudio Botto back in the 1990s. The baritone is Bryn Terfel. It's just glorious. Anyway.
Unfolds. The first movement is dark, solemn. Brahms used.
So this is the music that you're starting off with. Blessed are they that mourn. Orchestral introduction. ahead a little, go back to the original music. He that should go goes forth weeping. The song talks about weeping and joy. The movement actually ends in that talk about joy bringing machines that will not always be sad. The orchestra then concludes the material that okay, the third movement then, again, just going back to the text, I think I lost that. Yeah, here we go. Third movement, we're setting Psalm 39, 4 through 7. And this is where, the baritone is standing there, Lord, make me know my end and the measure of my days. This is where, our lives are short, you exist forever. So it's just, it's a very important recognition. But then, for the end of the movement, Brahms goes to the wisdom of Solomon. We call it the Song of Solomon. But the souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, and there is no torment shall touch them. So, a line of comfort at the end of this recognition, and of course, then at the end of Psalm 39, verse 7, my hope is in thee. And you can hear the music change to that as well. So we pick up the opening of this movement. Just one second. So everybody has to cough between movements. So you see the baritone standing up there on the right. Presents each text first, and then it goes to the choir. Statement of it, then it goes into the choir. Same text. Really solemn music, but happy music would sound silly here. text being stated by the baritone and then going out. We move ahead just a bit and we have the end of the psalm text in this movement is, my hope is in thee. And that comes right about here. That's the difference in the music. Now we go to the Song of Solomon text. The souls of the righteous. What he does is set up a pedal in the bass, and there's just all this imitation going on over it. The bass is, he's just saying, Bob, and of course, you know, if you want to, I mean, that is, if you will, this is the God we are calling. Yeah. The last movement, the next movement, you know, we've been wrestling with a lot of stuff in this movement. And in the next movement, he just kind of backs off. And this is where, you know, we have, how lovely is your dwelling place? I mean, this is the place we're going, right? So we sit back and consider that with some very different music, starting about here. The joy of this movement is just very hopeful and very peaceful.
a lot more forward motion than sometimes swaying. Marching forward.
And then the movement concludes much as it opened. You know, there's a lot of people, you know, they're not interested in this kind of thing because, well, I can't understand it. Well, no, you can't, probably, but that's where translations come in. And, you know, there's just so much music written to text set in languages we don't necessarily understand. But if we'll take the time to figure out what's going on and hear the way the composer is reacting to those things, instead of just going and hearing a concert where you hear a lot of pretty music and go home thinking, wow, I heard a lot of pretty music, you can actually, as a Christian, know what this guy was wanting us to think about. The music is a huge part of the message here. And as I said, it's just really surprising because if you really read about Brahms' biography, religion does, for most of his life, does not seem to have been terribly important. And yet he wrote this. So God reaches out in interesting ways. Any questions? Okay, well, we'll pick something else up sometime. Advent opportunities, and of course, not next Sunday, but the following Sunday is the first Sunday of Advent.
I think it's just a little overwhelming because I just listen to pretty music.
Yeah.
So the idea that there is a message there that comes through is just something I've never.
Yeah, well, and
registered for me.
it's a very satisfying one.
Yeah,
And I mean, this was one of the first times I actually sat down and listened and really figured out how the music was conveying the text. I mean, the music's so beautiful, it's just easy to sit back and revel in it and sort of get a general idea of what's going on, but specifically, you know, when he starts talking about we will be joyful, the music picks up and the music is joyful. I mean, we understand the musical language that this piece is set to. It's not a strange one to us. Romantic music, romantic orchestral music is, you know, an awful lot of what we hear in films today. It hasn't gone away. The kind of affects and emotional states that are presented in this music is something that most of us have experienced in some way.
we just went to Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah.
And because that's very familiar, it's in English.
Yeah.
You know, you are following it.
Yeah.
And thinking about what is being said and how the music conveys that and everything. That just.
Yeah. Well, that's why I wanted to spend a little time on this.
Oh, not understanding the complexity of the music, following it up on what Larry mentioned. How much note by note would have to be written for all of these parts by the composer? Or was just a general, and then it became a part of the people?
No, he wrote out. I mean, every line Brahms wrote.
Every line.
Oh yeah. Every line in the choir, every line in the orchestra. He wasn't getting. I mean, they're all his notes.
So it wasn't something that was just.
No, he did not. He orchestrated this too. He would have probably written it originally with piano accompaniment, but he did the orchestrations. And Brahms' orchestrations are pretty distinctive. It's hard to miss him. This is his work.
And the same way with Bach.
Yes. Yeah. It's not like Broadway musicals where somebody orchestrates it for you. You've written out every line. Brahms is a big favorite of mine. And I mean, you know, there's so many orchestral gestures in here, the likes of which you can hear in the symphonies, the way he's using the instrument. This is his work.